Hi, welcome back to the Perkins podcast. This is Alan Perkins of Horns Digest. This is part 3 of the Texas Tech preview and the Baylor recap. So continuing from where I left off before, TCU did not blitz often, but when they did, they were very successful against Texas Tech last week. TCU managed to get pressure with only 3, and it wasn't usually right off the bat. Typically, Mahomes had a good 3 seconds or 4 seconds before he had pressure, but TCU's coverage was so good that he couldn't find anybody. So as the pocket would start to collapse and he would start to try to scramble around to buy himself more time, that's typically when TCU was able to get sacks, hits on the quarterback, QB pressures, etc. TCU did a fantastic job of keeping Mahomes contained in the pocket and not getting too far upfield with their defensive ends and making sure that they maintained their gap integrity and stayed in their lanes. And they also spied Mahomes really well. Another thing that's going to be important is that the defensive tackles for Texas are going to need to make sure that they get a good push as well, because I noticed against Oklahoma there were plenty of times when Mahomes was able to drop back, survey the field, couldn't find anybody, and then when he wanted to go for a deep ball off schedule, he would step up into the throw and was able to because Oklahoma wasn't able to get a push in the middle of the line. So yet another reason to blitz if Texas isn't getting pressure with just 3 or 4. Mahomes is a pass-first quarterback, but the linebackers are going to need to be aware of his ability to run. Mahomes has 10 rushing TDs this year. Some are off of scrambles, some are off of QB keepers that are designed quarterback runs or zone reads where Mahomes decides to keep. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cliff Kingsbury throws in a couple runs for Mahomes, even though Tech already does it in the first place. But considering UT's difficulty with mobile quarterbacks, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. The only reason I could see Kingsbury being hesitant to use that, or at least early in the game, is that Mahomes has an AC shoulder injury. His thumb got messed up on his left hand against TCU, and there was nothing reported, but he was definitely slowed and banged up with his legs. Like, he was not moving the way he usually does, and he's not the fastest quarterback in the world, but he was hobbled even more so against TCU and couldn't move around as much as he's accustomed to. Texas has been hesitant to use a spy this season against rushing quarterbacks. I don't know why, because against Zach Ertz or Seth Russell, Texas had to have known that those guys are able to run the ball. So for whatever reason, Texas hasn't done that. In my mind, Malik Jefferson would be great for this role because his greatest contribution, his greatest attribute is reading a play and diagnosing it and knowing where the ball is going to go and his speed. And as a spy, he would be able to float around free of contact and read Mahomes' eyes. Malik is going to get an interception or a deflection that leads to an interception soon, in my mind. Play that comes to mind is against Mason Rudolph against Oklahoma State. He was in a middle linebacker spot, and Texas was in a 2-deep cover shell, and Malik dropped back as the middle linebacker in a typical Tampa 2 defense and was literally inches away from getting his hands on the ball and deflecting it on a post that Rudolph threw successfully, but the guy's just been so close to making so many plays this year. I'm hoping for his sake and the team's sake he can get one, because I just feel like mentally he's just very aware of where the ball is going to go. The defensive line and linebackers are going to have to play much better in this game and much more consistently. Baylor gained 398 yards on the ground against Texas last week, and that's obviously most likely not to happen this week, considering that Tech only runs for just over 100 yards this year and is one of the worst as far as yards gained on the ground. But still, that's not going to work, obviously. So we'll have to see how that pans out. UT quarterback Shane Buechele and all of the 8 to 10 talented Texas wide receivers versus the defensive backs is the next spot on the field that I'm going to analyze. Tech usually has their corners within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage and their safeties within 10 yards. They are susceptible to being beat, and I wouldn't be fooled by the TCU score. That was more about Kenny Hill not playing well, who was benched in the fourth quarter. And to me, Texas Tech didn't do anything amazing on defense. I just think that Kenny Hill is having trouble at this point in time figuring out how to move the ball at TCU. So I watched that whole game, and I didn't see anything that jumped off the page at me as far as Tech batting down all sorts of passes or getting into the backfield all day long or anything like that. So that's my opinion. Sterling Gilbert needs to attack the defense in a variety of ways. Shane Buechele, in my mind, can make all the throws from everything I've seen, and his best attributes are his accuracy, his mental approach, and his heart. So I just think that they should test the defense with every route known to mankind in an offensive playbook and let Buechele go through his progressions instead of restricting him and handcuffing him to only 5 routes. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I know that Sterling Gilbert has his system, and Texas is much better on offense this year, but that also has to do with the fact that Buechele is on campus in comparison to Swoops throwing the ball last year with Jay Norvell as the offensive coordinator. So I like Gilbert and what he's done, but they need to open up the playbook, and they need to get rid of the 18-wheeler, and they need to get rid of wide receiver screens until they start blocking them better, in my opinion. Texas is loaded with skill position talent, yet it hasn't been allowed to fully grow and develop due to the play calling, in my mind. I'd like to see a 4 wide receiver set with a single back in the backfield. I know that's not Gilbert's system, and I know that he'll never use it, but to me, with this roster, an extra receiver on the field is more valuable than a tight end blocking, especially considering that Deontay Foreman is a beast and he doesn't need that much help blocking. He hasn't been getting that much help from the offensive line this year, getting contact right at the line of scrimmage, if not 2 yards down past the line of scrimmage. So that would be a better way to use personnel, in my opinion, but I know that's not Gilbert's system. A lot of people are calling for Devin Duvernay to try to get him the ball in space, and I agree with that. And the depth that Texas has at wide receiver is great, but they do need to find a go-to receiver. They haven't really decided who that is. Every single week it's been a different guy getting big yards, which is good because it's good to be versatile and have a lot of guys that can contribute, which is great, but you need that go-to guy on a third down, and Texas hasn't found that yet. And going back to the Duvernay thing, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea for Texas to run routes where they are predetermining where the ball's going to go, like on a screen or something like that. I think, especially with a guy like Buechele, who can be so accurate and has difficulty being accurate on screens, probably because he's having to get the ball out in 1 second and he's rushing. But considering how smart Buechele is and how well he reads defenses and how accurate he is, I think it's better just to spread him out in 4 or 5 wide and just let guys attack all different levels of the field. And if you can catch Duvernay on a slant or crossing route, a drag route, whatever, and then he can go from open space in that situation, that'll work out just fine. And even if he doesn't get yards after the catch, when you're running routes downfield, you don't need yards after the catch because all you have to do is secure the ball, and then you have a first down anyway. So it's not as vital to get yards after the catch with those sorts of routes. UT's defensive backs versus Mahomes and all of his receivers. To me, Mahomes' biggest attributes are his arms, his toughness, and his pre-snap audibles. He does a lot of checks and signals at the line and makes adjustments. And he's got other attributes too, but those are the ones that stuck out to me the most. Like I said, Mahomes is a great QB, and I think he'll probably have a good day against Texas, but we'll see how that goes. Last week, the Texas secondary played great, so they'll obviously have to keep that up. And the defense actually forced 2 turnovers, and it really could have been 4 if not for questionable officiating. I don't want to say that the officials' calls were bad, but they were just very close calls. So Texas did have 2 turnovers, but it could have been 4. The ones that come to mind that were questionable to me were the Seth Russell pitch on a lateral, and it was ruled incomplete, even though it looked like it went sideways or backwards to me. And then Russell on the second last play of the game, Russell fumbled the ball and Malik Jefferson picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown, and they called it. They reversed it for forward progress. So whether you want to say those were bad calls or not, Texas still could have ended up with 4 turnovers in that game and without much of a stretch of imagination. So whether or not those are bad calls, I just thought that was noteworthy to stay instead of 2. It was really essentially could have been 4. When matched up in the slot, PJ Locke, I noticed against Baylor, would play with inside technique or inside leverage and try to take that away. and yet Baylor would still run routes right at him, even though he was not taking away the outside and the outside was wide open. He would run right to him, and Seth Russell would still throw on those dig routes to that area. And so to me, that was great scouting and execution by the coaches and by Locke, because they had obviously seen something on tape, and Baylor didn't adjust or didn't run an option route where they could say, hey, if this guy's got inside leverage, even pre-snap, just run an out route. Why are you running right at him? Just run away from him. But Baylor didn't for whatever reason. So Locke caused incompletions that showed up on the box score, but there was also some where a pass just, didn't touch anybody, but it was incomplete because of the way Locke played it. So, yeah. Special teams, to me, Texas Tech has the advantage. Texas Tech punter Michael Barden is the weak point for Tech. He averages 39.5 yards per punt. He has a long of 59 and 4 punts that traveled over 50 yards, but I thought something that was interesting was that Barden fumbled a snap, leading to a turnover on downs against TCU, and he'd done that earlier in the year also, and he has no hang time on his punt. So maybe this is an opportunity for Monty Foreman to get a 30 or 40-yard return. We'll see, because Texas' return game this year has not been good at all in kickoff or punt returns. Michael Dixon is second in the country with 47.8 yards average per punt, and he has a long of 64 yards this year, and he pinned 17 punts inside the 20. And he had 18 punts that traveled over 50 yards or more, so he's a heck of a punter, and UT is very lucky to have him. Trent Domain is 8 for 11 this year at 73% on the season, and as long as 43 yards, and he made the game-winning kick against Baylor. And then Texas Tech's kicker Clayton Hatfield is 8 for 9 on the year for field goals, but his long is only 43, so he's been very accurate, but they haven't asked him to do anything from a long distance. I'm going to go with Kingsbury on this as far as the coaching advantage. Kingsbury and his staff out-coached Strong last year in Austin, and considering Strong's game management issues and at times personnel decisions, I still need to see more before I'm going to lean Charlie's way. Play calling and gadget plays, what I noticed from Texas Tech is they run every kind of route: slant, post, fly routes, play action to the slant, play action to the seam, wide receiver screens, sending their tight ends and running backs to the flat when they're running a heavy set, a pump fake on a wide receiver string, and then a go, so a pump and go, run pass options, running back slipping out of the backfield for just a check down, halfback toss, a trick play where they pitch it on a reverse and then they throw it back to Mahomes. In the red zone, I did notice a distinct change where Texas Tech will run quarterback runs, zone reads, speed options, and swing passes to the running backs and or Mahomes scrambling. Those were the types of plays that I saw Tech run, and I saw them be successful with. They didn't have a lot of success in the two games that I watched against TCU and Oklahoma, really attacking downfield towards the end zone with fade routes or post routes or anything like that. So that was kind of interesting to see. Tech's favorite routes or favorite formations to run are 4 and 5 receiver sets. If they're not having success in the passing game or they're having trouble with protection, they'll switch from a 5 receiver set to a 4 receiver set with 1 running back, and they'll also run with stacked receivers in the pistol formation at times. Going over the Oklahoma-Texas Tech game, Baker Mayfield did whatever he wanted, not shockingly, since they got 66 points. And he had all day to throw, and OU was very versatile in how they attacked Texas Tech. It was a very unpredictable attack. OU led by 14 on many separate occasions, so the score looked close, but there was at least 3 or 4 times when OU was up by 14 or more. And the Tech defense missed lots of tackles, and OU went deep successfully 4 times against Tech. And they threw it to Mixon out of the backfield. They threw it to the fullback for a touchdown, 30 yards downfield. And Mahomes and Mayfield both completed some great passes, and there were some other passes where they kind of threw it up for grabs on a 50-50 ball, and their receiver won the battle. So the DBs for both teams looked lost for much of the night. So this is Alan Perkins for Horns Digest, and I appreciate that you're listening to the Perkins podcast. And check out Horns Digest, where Chip Brown has 25 years of experience covering UT athletics. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.